Recently, the disgusting lamestream media tried to take down, of all people, Rich Lowry over an appearance he made on this show. It was a live broadcast, and I'm losing track of my news events now. I think it was after the second assassination attempt. Yes, it was. We went live, as we've done with Rich on many assassination attempts over the summer. There's so many, and debate coverage and so on. He's on the show a lot, and in live, we're always live. Anyway, so in discussing at that time the Springfield, Ohio story and the migrants who had been brought there by the Biden administration, all that, Rich flubbed his words and would later explain he was conflating the words immigrants and migrants. And it sounded a little dicey. It was obvious to me he had made a flub. I'd known Rich a long time. You'd be hard pressed to find a more decent, honorable, good man than Rich Lowry. He's been in the public eye for decades, never been accused of racism never. He is just totally above board in every way. And by the way, the accusations don't make it so. I can speak to that. In any event, so he had a verbal flub. He moved on. That was it. But those cretins at Media Matters, who monitor everyone who's right of center and their broadcasts, decided to pull it, put it out on the internet, and tell the world he had said the N-word. Here's the original clip.
The police have gone through 11 months of recordings of calls, and they've only found 2 Springfield residents calling to complain about Haitian migrants taking geese from ponds.
Okay. So, first of all, the absurdity of suggesting that Rich would have said the N-word just so in casual use on this show on a live broadcast, like he would have, that's the way Rich talks. I mean, this is what Media Matters' fantasy about conservatives is. And not just Media Matters, but some in the far left. And that I would have sat there like, sure, that's a fine word to just throw around in front of my live audience. No problem. And that we then would have later, because this is what we do, cut the whole segment as a podcast and released it on all podcast forums without cutting it. Sure, let's put that word out there for everybody and put it on YouTube. Yes, we stand by that and cut. Like, it's just so absurd, right? So I ignore Media Matters. I couldn't give a shit about them other than I note them as a terrible, evil force, but I don't respond to them. So they get this going pretty much with the far left. You know, there a couple of more mainstream people weighed in on it, but mostly to defend Rich and say, like, what are you doing? But enter NPR. And NPR decided to write it up as though Rich were guilty of doing it in an absolute smear of the guy. And today they have admitted that they were wrong, that they didn't live up to their own standards, that that's not what he said. And while there is no apology to Rich Lowry, which there should be, NPR, they admit through their sort of public editor, the person who's supposed to be the liaison between NPR and its audience, that the story as originally published wasn't just unfair, it was inaccurate. The story told readers Lowry, quote, appeared to use the racial slur. And they make clear that is not the case. They point out their own media editor went back and said, that's not what Rich had said. And then they say this: second, after recognizing that the story was wrong, NPR should have acknowledged the changes to both the headline and the body of the story because they had updated it to try to sort of slide in his denials and the truth without acknowledging they'd smeared him. And they should have included a formal note of clarification because readers were much more likely to come away from the original story with the belief that Lowry actually said the racial slur. A clarification note would be a public acknowledgement that the first story fell short. This story did not meet NPR's standards. And they said our original story was written in a way that created more confusion to the point of being misleading. Who was it written by? It was written by some trans activist who goes by the first letter C, last name Mandler, who spent C's career in activism with GLAAD and other media outlets trying to be one of, the very annoying trans activists who are not representative of the actual trans community, but just absolutely vicious. They are. I don't know C, but I can see C is also dishonest and vicious in the way C, just the letter, reported for NPR. So where does one go to get one's reputation back, Maureen? Because Rich had not one, but 2 cancellations from the absolutely shameful Badger Institute, which is supposed to be a conservative organization. Shame on you, disgusting people. Don't you ever send me an invitation to do anything for you. And also Indiana State, neither of whom has apologized to Rich. What do you make of it?
Rich Lowry, had he called for the Intifada, had he joined with pro-Hamas protesters, he'd be fine, he'd be lionized. He made a conflation that was wholly innocent, and rather than being given the benefit of the doubt, and rather than actually looking at this guy's entire history, the left ran to bury him and to dance on his grave. And it's really disgusting. And all this really does is make people afraid, especially anyone who's not on the far left, to open their mouths. And you and I have talked about this more than once, but I see it in my own cohort of really smart, well-read, sophisticated, well-traveled people who will only speak behind closed doors to a select number of their nearest and dearest about what they really think about any given topic: political, social, religious, cultural, whatever. Because we are in this moment where, unless you're adhering to some really wacky shit, like unless you're like Ta-Nehisi Coates, who is out there plugging a book that is basically like Israel should no longer exist.
Right.
You're basically on the verge of getting canceled on any given day.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And Rich, to his credit, wrote a defense of himself in National Review at the time, explaining that he had merged the 2 words. And if you watch the segment, it's obvious that that's what happened. And really naming the reason we know about the Badger Institute and Indiana State is because he told us in that piece that he was getting canceled. And the whole point of his piece was, cancel me for something that I actually said, not for something that I didn't said. We've crossed over into new territory where you're getting canceled for something you didn't actually even say. And NPR is admitting that its own media correspondent, who, by the way, whoever you are, C. Mandler, you are not the media correspondent. Maybe you should defer to the media correspondent, because the reason David Folkenflik is the media correspondent is because he covers the media personalities in the media all the time. And maybe he knows Rich Lowry slightly better than you do and his history, as opposed to you, C, who seems to see some white guy who you were sure to label as a conservative in both of your pieces, and doesn't just jump to the conclusion that he's a raging racist who just drops N-bombs on any live media appearance. But David Folkenflik that night was tweeting out, "This is not what happened. Stop it." And this piece by the public editor points out, but the poor C didn't know. They didn't read David Folkenflik's tweet. Well, too bad on you, C. You suck. That's why you have a media correspondent. Call him up and ask him if he knows anything about Rich Lowry. All of it is so gross. And Maureen, to my point that I was just making, both of the NPR pieces, the first one they did, which is the hit piece, and then the so-called correction, where they updated to include Rich's denial, and I defended him, which I think they included, and so did Andy McCarthy. Both of them say as follows, the headline: conservative editor-in-chief appears to use racial slur. And the second one, conservative editor-in-chief says mispronunciation led to accusations of using slur. Now you tell me, why is it relevant what Rich's political views are? Why do they put Is it that liberals cannot be racist? It's clearly because this is NPR's worldview when it comes to people on the right.
No question. This is the same outlet that, if I'm correct with the timeline, because this has been such a year of whiplash, fired the whistleblower who wrote this incredible piece. Forgive me, I forget his name, this like hero's name, saying that NPR was basically spoon feeding their worldview without adhering to actual facts.
Uri Berliner. UYRI Berliner.
Yes, that's the guy. And he
Y-U-R-I.
was basically, the call was coming from inside the house. Like, and it wasn't just philosophical, and it wasn't just about journalistic ethics. It was also about commerce. He was saying we are shedding listeners by the day. They don't come to us anymore because they don't believe a thing we have to say to them. And he got fired for it. I mean, they didn't say that was the reason, but that was the reason. And he got rehired by the Free Press, which is definitely a much better home for him. But this is why nobody listens to NPR, unless you're like a true delusional believer that all people on the right must be inherently racist, inherently sexist, inherently intellectually limited. That's their stock in trade now. It's so sad. It's just sad. And I just, the only good thing that comes out of this, I think, is that Rich Lowry, those 2 cancellations are bullshit, but that he survived this. And I hope it's an object lesson for anyone on the left who has such an itchy trigger finger. I mean, again, we were just talking about the litany of reasons Doug Emhoff should really be investigated. And it's just swords down. Nobody's going for it except for us. Same thing here. It's like they'll never, the correction, and you know, that old saw, the story's a headline, the correction is like a thumbnail, you know, but he survived it. And that's a good thing.
Genus Cell is back with a stunning end of summer sale. For a limited time, you get the top selling Genus Cell Dark Spot Corrector right now to see those dark marks and sunspots disappear right before your eyes. Stephanie from Santa Cruz, California says, love this product. Leaves my skin looking younger, even at my age, she writes. Imagine sunspots, brown spots, discoloration, even red inflamed patches all disappearing in front of your very eyes. The Genus Cell guarantee, you will see results the very first day, guaranteed, or you will get your money back. Who else gives that? Take advantage of the Genus Cell most popular package, which also includes the classic Genus Cell bags and puffiness treatment and immediate effects product, all at close to 70% off. And if you're a new customer, there's a big surprise waiting for you on GenusCell.com right now. Just look for the word red. Intriguing. What does it mean? Go to GenusCell.com/MK today and start looking younger tomorrow. GenusCell.com/MK. Get a free limited edition beauty box with your order. That's GenusCell.com/MK. GenusCell.com/MK. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.